It was a bit of a strange week, friends. Images that we saw online on our computers for some of us. I saw some images this week of a past president in handcuffs, then sitting in a jail cell, and one where he was somewhat surprisingly athletically running through Central Park from police. These all made the news. They could have been images from anywhere, but this president was pretty recognizable in the photos. But other elements in the photos were kind of jumbled and strange. The writing on the police badges, for instance, were some kind of gibberish. The images made the news because they weren't authentic images of something that happened, of anything that happened. They were deep fakes. But seeing images that betray a possible outcome of an ongoing news story and understanding that people all over the world might have thought they were real points to a new reality, a virtual reality many of us are facing. The line between what is real and what is not is getting less clear by the day. In a few short weeks, or it was just a few short weeks ago, that artificial intelligence engines were loosed on the world. And they are running at full throttle, friends. And one of the places where they're finding very early adoption, schools, universities in particular. With just a few keystrokes, you can get a first, then a second, and a third, and a fourth, and as many drafts as you want with these online tools. And for someone who's having a strange week, struggling to write something, it could be a godsend, right? So just out of curiosity, I fired up one of the engines and I input, please, write me a Unitarian sermon on the importance of virtue. I thought the please might get me a little nicer response. My brothers and sisters, today I want to talk to you about the importance of virtue in our lives. Virtue is an essential component of our spiritual growth, and it helps us lead a fulfilling and meaningful life. Not bad so far. Needs some work on the pronouns. Virtue can be defined as a moral excellence or a good quality that is practiced consistently. It is the habit of doing what is right even when it is not easy and standing up for what we believe in. Uh-oh. That's not bad. One of the essential virtues we must cultivate in our lives is humility. Oh, I'm just going to open with humility. Let's see what they've got. Humility is the quality of being humble and modest. I don't know about that. It helps us recognize our limitations and weaknesses and accept that we are not perfect. It also allows us to see the good in others and appreciate their contributions. Another important virtue, is kindness. Kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous, and compassionate. It is about treating. Network error, there was an error generating response. Oh my. Yes, it's been a strange week. Kindness and friendship broke artificial intelligence. That was kind of scary. As I was trying to cheat on my sermon writing, the text flashed red and said, I got a network error. Now, after growing up on a steady diet of 2001: A Space Odyssey, I was worried the next thing I was going to hear was, "Just what do you think you're doing, TJ?" Open the pod bay doors. No, I'm kidding. It was an alarming introduction to this new technology. And even if artificial intelligence can't talk about virtue, and if friendship breaks its code, there's no reason we can't. So, in this series during Lent, we look together at redeeming words. And what could be more redeeming than virtue? Especially if it keeps us from glitching out when we have to talk about kindness. Virtue is not a passing fancy. It is not a mode or even a trend. It's not even a value or a belief. Virtues don't change. They are immortal, they are eternal, they are unchangeable. Aristotle believed there were 4 primary virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. That's a good list. And they've been around for a while, those virtues. But they went through a bit of a revision about 1,500 years after he wrote them. See, Thomas Aquinas was a moral philosopher in the Middle Ages, and he was a big fan of Aristotle. Today, Aquinas is revered as one of the great theologians embraced by the entire Christian church. But his writing, when he wrote it, was considered profane by some of the people in his church. Some believed his writing relied a little too much on Aristotle and way too much on logic. Tells you something about church in the Middle Ages, friends. And upon his death, some powerful people in his church banned his teachings altogether. They drew a bright line between what they thought was the worldly, the secular, classical, and I'll just say it, that pagan thinker, Aristotle, and the kind of holy, divinely inspired thought that they wanted to have in their church. It took 300 more years for the church to agree Aquinas was saying anything important, and then another 200 years for his writing to be heralded as the revolutionary work on virtue and a range of other subjects that it was. And today, after the better part of a millennium, Aquinas' work is thought of as the inspired work of the divine. It just takes patience, friends. Aquinas simplified things from Aristotle and talked about 3 virtues. 3 is easier than 4, so that's good. Faith, hope, and charity. Now, a lot of people think it's supposed to go faith, hope, and love, because that's what Paul wrote about in Corinthians. But a long time ago, someone realized feelings are great, but they don't make for good eating. When you're starving, someone liking you a lot, or even loving you a ton, who doesn't do anything, to change the situation that got you where you are, where being hungry is threatening your life, those feelings aren't helping anyone. And that's why Aquinas interpreted love as charity. It took him more than 700 years to get the confidence and belief of his peers, and my chatbot couldn't even get through one sentence about friendship without quitting. And that just proves ain't no school like the old school, friends. But what's charity to you? What's the first thing that comes into your mind? For most, at least, the concept of charity in part is an entry in that wonderful, exalted text, the Internal Revenue Code. Even there, it functions in practice as a warning mostly against uttering a set of words that might make that charity lose its sacred, holy, and beneficently granted 501c3 status. Sorry. This can happen particularly when ministers endorse particular party candidates. Mostly today, though, we think of charity as charitable giving, right? of giving money to an organization or a group, and I know everyone here cares more about the giving and the support to a place like this than any tax benefit it may or may not bestow. The tax break is just a happy byproduct and might convince us to give just a little more. But in the old school, that profanity-spewing Aquinas, interpreting that pagan Aristotle, would call giving to the poor something else. He called it mercy, not charity. Mercy is the relief of suffering, and groups who are trying to stop the suffering of their neighbors and friends are really practicing mercy, keeping people out of desperation. But by any stretch of its original meaning, this is not charity. Charity for Aquinas meant a lifelong practice to remake the human world entirely so that there is no unnecessary suffering, no untreated illness, no preventable hunger, no dehumanizing desperation in the first place. And in our reading by James Baldwin, one of the great prophets of the last century, he says the present social and political apparatus cannot serve human need. One prophet to another, Baldwin to Aquinas, there's a major network error going on here. If we've got old school charity wrong out there in the world, what do we have today that is closer to the virtue of charity? Danielle Allen, one of the finest thinkers about just about anything, has some thoughts on that in her foundational work, Talking to Strangers, which is a contemporary treatise on classical ethics. The virtue she sees as closest to charity is friendship. And she's not talking about Golden Girls friendships where you all come together to support and love one another over some cheesecake. She's talking about A-team friendships where you all come together even though you're different and kick some butt. Allen teaches that citizenship, friendship, and justice are the most rewarding of human endeavors. And I quote, precisely because all three try to convert rivalrous self-interest to equitable self-interest. Rivalrous to equitable. And the sharpest focus she draws of these three, of citizenship, friendship, and justice, all good, is upon friendship. And in particular, on its power to overcome rivalrous self-interest, because in her words, the legal system does not on its own restrain and cannot on its own manage the problem of rivalrous self-interest. Now, what is the real difference? Where's the line between rivalrous self-interest and equitable self-interest? Well, I'm glad you asked. It just so happens I'm a credentialed expert on the subject of self-interest. Yeah. When I was hoping to become a minister, back in the old school, when I didn't have a fancy virtual reality computer writing my sermons for me, I underwent a 2-day intensive psychological evaluation as part of the ordination process. I wasn't singled out. Everyone has to do that. I promise. I answered all kinds of questions on sheets beforehand, and in fairness, my nephew helped me answer a few of them. I needed all the help I could get. And when I got the results from the psychologist, he said I'd answered one of the flagged questions in a way that we would have to discuss. Yeah. I was a little worried. What had I said? Could I blame my nephew for it? The question was this: agree or disagree? People will take what they can get. Anyone agree? Show of hands. All right, disagrees. Nice. Good people. I answered agree. The psychologist explained that this answer indicated a streak of amorality. I was like, immortality? That's great. Then I saw the hearing doctor after that. It's good. No. What he said was, well, we see that a lot with Unitarians. My pearls. I just about had a butt-kicking A-Team network error right there in his office. But what he said got me thinking. Man, I'll tell you. Ellen tells us in her book over and over that it's only in friendship, strategic friendship, that we can overcome rivalrous self-interest, the driving power that makes the flourishing of all impossible, and move to equitable self-interest and hope to heal this hurting world. Now, there's some challenges to making friendships in our society today. I mean, for the past 3 years, many of us have been driven into more and more isolated ways of living, and some of us kind of liking it, you know? The forming of deep and supportive friendships in young people today is at an all-time low. A recent survey asked young people under 30 how many people you have in your life who you could go to with the hardest, the deepest, the darkest wonderings of your soul. The most popular answer was 0. And divisions, particularly in our public institutions, seem to be deepening. So how do we make the change? How do we reach out to form friendships and grow equitable self-interest? It's hard. Today, if you dare display an actual virtue in public, you risk being accused of virtue signaling. Virtue signaling. Man, I tell you. If Aquinas was alive, he'd be like, wait. I don't know if this is how he talks. You have a way to tell hundreds or thousands of people which virtues you hold closest? You mean you can put up a sign or wear a t-shirt and people will understand your hopes and your dreams? I'm going to do that. No, Tommy, wait a second. No. That sounds like virtue signaling. Don't be telling people what you really hold as a virtue. And Tommy to me is like, yes, that's a perfect name for it. Virtue signaling. I will write my next treatise about virtue signaling. And maybe Tommy is onto something. We're close, me and Tommy. Charity is the way we think of very close, very meaningful, very spiritual friendships today. The kind where you would do anything at all, to shelter, to clothe, to put a true friend into the best possible situation that they can possibly be in, not because it is good for them, because it is good for you. Every thinker, from Aristotle to Aquinas, from Baldwin to Allen, from the mountaintops of the world religions down to the tomes they scour for meaning the world over, knows this deep, this old, this true wisdom. The A-Team is better than the Golden Girls. This is a Golden Girls crowd. I can feel it. But think about it. Uniting for a common purpose to help others helps us. That is what old school charity is all about. The greatest, the mightiest of the virtues, the queen of the virtues at last is true friendship. And if we commit to this in all realms of our lives and practice it over and over despite setbacks, frustration, and failures, and become known as the religion of friendship, the religion of partnership, the religion of community, we may hear those magic words at last that I've heard and I want you to hear. We see that a lot with Unitarians. Virtual reality can satisfy, can gratify. Virtuous reality can change the world. And the world over, systems of thought and belief hold to their virtues as signals of times in rough going, and times are going rough. On the seas of doubt and the troubled tides of division, those are signals, those are signs out on the boat, on the ocean that we are sailing. The faiths sprung from the ancient Greco-Roman world also happen not to hold any particular authority on this subject at all. We need all the signs we can get, from tomes on Hinduism to Buddhism, on Jainism, and even Islam. James Baldwin tells us of this about this country. This is the only nation under heaven that contains the universe. East, west, north, south, black, white. This is the only nation in the world that can hope to begin to liberate mankind from the strangling idea of the national identity and the tyranny of the territorial dispute. Civic virtue is hard. But we are not alone in its practice. It is right here in our faith, in a community that lives each day the deep truth that we do not have to think alike or believe alike or even like the same formulaic 80s television show to love alike. There will be times when what we want to say, what we want to share with others in friendship, in kindness, might be stopped mid-sentence by ruptures in the networks of our life so damaged by pain and fear and rivalrous self-interest, but that is when we try again. That is when we love again. That is when we remember that kindness in the face of danger, that comfort in the face of pain, that love in the face even of hate is what Baldwin tells us is the last best hope on this earth. And we may each pray unceasing that when they speak of us, of the kindness, the comfort, the love, the charity, that they may say, we see that a lot with Unitarians. May it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.